What is up, everyone? It's Dante Guardi back at it with the Utah Utes Football Digest. Today, we'll be breaking down the Utah Utes versus Baylor Bears Week 2 matchup. Here from a little more of a sports betting perspective. Last week, I gave out a winner for you guys. I gave you all the Utah-Florida first half under 21, 22 and a half. It moved around a little bit, but regardless, no matter what number you got it at, it hit. It wouldn't have hit if Mekhi Bernard had caught that touchdown on that trick play there at the end of the first half, but thankfully he dropped it. We were able to make some money, and the Utes were still able to win comfortably, which is always a great thing to see. So this week's going to be a little bit of a different matchup, though, taking on a wounded animal pretty much in the Baylor Bears, a team that lost at home as 30-point favorites last week against Texas State. Their pass blocking was absolutely atrocious. They were able to just generate no real rhythm on offense, and their inexperienced secondary really didn't look all too good against the Texas State team that was kind of coming out for vengeance. They just got that Incarnate Word head coach. He had been really doing great things for Incarnate Word at the FCS level. They were a perennial team in the FCS playoff, but I mean, losing to Texas State at home week 1, there's not really an excuse for that. But as for right now, let's just get into the Utah quarterback situation. We got Cameron Rising or Bryson Barnes. We saw Bryson Barnes go out there last week. Obviously, he dropped a dime on the first play of Utah's offensive play for Utah's entire season with that 70-yard bomb to Money Parks, which was just fantastic. But outside of that, Utah's offense was pretty stagnant, not very efficient on the ground or through the air, not very efficient on third down either. Got some nice field position because of that Sione Vaki interception. But honestly, Utah's offense was not overly impressive. But at the same time, I don't think anyone was really expecting them to be super impressive, especially without Brant Keithy and Cameron Rising. The offensive line had a little bit of a tough matchup going against a really big Florida front seven. They had a couple of defensive tackles that were right around the 400-pound mark. And then you look at Baylor, it's going to be a completely different team. They boast primarily a three-man front. They had a very big defensive tackle last year, a great run stopper in Siaki Ika, who was one of the biggest gets for Dave Aranda through the transfer portal. He came with Dave Aranda from LSU, was a part of that 2019 squad that had Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson. I mean, Siaki Ika was a fantastic player, and that's a monumental loss for Baylor's front seven, because I think with him at defensive tackle, weighing 360 pounds, just being an absolutely elite run stopper, it gave Baylor's defense a lot of flexibility, especially when it came to defending the run and kind of just organizing that defensive line, because they play primarily a three-man front. And when you have a 360-pound just absolute beast of a run stopper, it makes things a lot easier having a man less on your defensive line. Whereas this year, a little bit more inexperienced, not a lot of talent. There certainly is no Siaki Ika there. And I think that they're going to be kind of inviting Utah to run the football in this game, whereas Utah kind of struggled in that department last game. I think this game is going to be a little bit different. I think Utah's really going to emphasize running the football, and I think they're going to do a good job of it because, like I said, Baylor plays primarily a three-man front. I think they're going to kind of invite Utah to run the ball, and that just plays to Utah's strength more than anything. We saw Jaquin Jackson not really get going last week. I think this is a week where he is primed for a breakout. I think Utah's just going to feed him the ball, him and Mekhi Bernard, and the rushing attack is going to be pretty good. The passing attack is a little bit more sketchy, though. Baylor's secondary isn't great. Like, it's not good by any means. But at the same time, we weren't really able to see Utah generate a lot of rhythm throughout the air other than that big explosive play they had right at the very beginning. So if Utah is able to run the ball and eventually get a couple of Baylor safeties, linebackers to bite on a play-action pass, we could see a very similar play happening down in Waco. But I'm just going to play it safe, honestly. I don't really see Utah's passing attack really doing too much against Baylor. And you got to take into account as well, there's a reason why the line is what it is. If you looked at this matchup last week, the look-ahead line was Utah -1.5 down to a pick-em even. So, I mean, this was a game that Vegas was expecting to be very close. And then just after a 1-week sample size, the line has shifted to Utah -8. I can understand why that's happening. But in reality, in college football, it's not very often we see Vegas moving lines to that extent. It's happening twice this week, actually, with the Colorado game as well. But this is just a very, very obscure week for college football in general because, like I said, a lot of drastic line movements, and we usually don't see that happening. We usually don't see this much of an overreaction from Vegas after just a 1-week sample size. But here we are. We're in this position now, and this is a very odd game to kind of be breaking down, honestly, just because of the uncertainties on both sides of the ball. We saw Baylor go to Sawyer Robertson last week, but he didn't look very good. They ended up going back to an injured Blake Shapen. He put together a really gutsy performance. Like, the dude was clearly injured, and it was clearly going to be an injury that was going to sideline him for multiple weeks. Breaking news, it is an injury that's going to sideline him for multiple weeks, and it was a really gutsy performance, but I do think it says a lot about Baylor's confidence in Sawyer Robertson that they were able to just throw out an injured Blake Shapen, who they knew was not going to be healthy for the week following, but still thinking that he put Baylor in a better chance to win than Sawyer Robertson did. And then you look at Baylor's offense. I mean, their rushing attack is nothing too special. None of their running backs are going to be blowing you away with their speed or their physicality. They're all guys who average less than 3 yards after contact per carry. Not super great breakaway speed either. In the offensive line, they got a couple of solid transfers from BYU and the Barrington brothers. But outside of them, there's not a whole lot to love. I'm not obsessed with this offensive line, especially given they gave up 31 pressures last week. Now you're looking at a Utah defensive line that gets a lot of pieces back. Junior Tafuna might play this week. Samote Peppa might play this week. Van Fillinger is going to be a lot more healthy this week than he was last week. And you also got guys like Jonah Ellis in the mix, who had multiple sacks last week against a very quality Florida team that I think boasts a better offensive line than the Baylor team that Utah is going to be facing this week. But once again, I mean, Baylor's a dead animal right now. They just lost as 30-point favorites, so they're going to be ecstatic to play this game. Also, you could argue it was a little bit of a look-ahead spot for them last week, having Utah coming to town the week following. Obviously, that's not really an excuse for losing to a 30-point underdog, but it's still something that you got to take into account. This Baylor team is going to be looking a little bit different, I think, this week. They're going to be looking a little bit more sound inside the trenches, and they're going to be just simply looking to get right. And they're seeing a Utah team coming off an emotional victory and thinking that this is a great spot to get a marquee victory, especially after losing. But in terms of Baylor's defense, really, I like I said, they play that primarily three-man front, which I think is really going to invite Utah to run the ball. And that's a game that Baylor does not want to play against this Utah team, which knows that they have to run the ball very effectively to compensate for a passing attack that isn't going to be reaching its full potential for a few more weeks. I think Utah is really going to emphasize running the football. I think Baylor's going to be able to stop the run to an extent, but really not that great. I think Utah averages around 4.5, 5 yards per carry, racks up $150 in yardage, something like that, a few touchdowns as well. But I don't think Utah's passing attack is really going to be all that potent. I don't think anything on Baylor is really going to be all that potent, honestly. I love the Utah secondary. I love the height of the corners. I love the depth at corner. And I also love the speed of these safeties. You look at Baylor's passing attack. They got Monterey Baldwin. He's their go-to guy. He's one of the fastest players in the entire country, actually. He clocked in at I think, 22.6 miles per hour sometime last season. So very quick athlete, very, very, very smooth athlete. And they also got a transfer from Arkansas. I'm blanking on his name, unfortunately, but he's another very good player, another shifty player. So they got some shifty receivers, but I don't think they're going to try Utah long, which is what you're going to have to do against these safeties who aren't extremely tall. You're going to want to target them in 50-50 situations, but I don't think Baylor has the personnel to really do that. It's going to be a lot of short, quick passing, a lot of running the football. And I think short, quick passing is kind of the area of this defense that Utah's really going to excel at, because I mean, if you look at the speed of the safeties, Cole Bishop and Sione Vaki both just come through like a freight train. Both of them have great downhill speed. Both of them are great tacklers, and we saw Utah really sound tackling last week, and we know that the coaches really emphasize tackling throughout the offseason. So I don't think Baylor's going to be a team that's really going to make Utah miss, and I also don't think they're going to be a team that's going to stretch Utah deep. I think their offense is going to be kind of trapped in this situation, and they're really going to rely on forcing turnovers to give them good field position to provide any sort of spark on offense. So with that being said, my best bet for this game is the Baylor team total under 19.5. I don't see them reaching 20 points without a special teams or a defensive touchdown. If this game is pretty smooth, which I think it will be for Utah, I don't think they're going to turn the ball over a whole lot. I don't see Utah's defense giving up 20 points to Sawyer Robertson and a pretty mediocre at best Baylor offense, one that's not going to test you deep, one that isn't really going to make a Utah defense with a lot of experience, a lot of talent, not really going to make them make a lot of mistakes. And I think that Utah's going to just come in here with a sound mentality. We talked to the guys at media availability the other day, and I don't think I've seen a Utah football team this confident. Like last year, they were very confident. I think that goes without saying. But like this season, there's just a different energy kind of in the building, I think. And the way the players are talking, it's a lot different than years past. And I think that this is just a really confident group, and they all are really bought into each other and bought into winning the Pac-12 for a third year straight. You could argue this is a look-ahead spot given the circumstances of the two teams, but I just don't see this Utah team folding in this spot, really. I don't think they're going to turn the ball over. I don't think they're going to beat themselves. I think they're going to run the ball well. And I don't see Baylor really doing much on offense. Like I said, I think they're kind of trapped in a box. They're not going to be able to generate anything in short, quick passing. They're not going to be able to stretch the field deep. And I don't think against this Utah front seven, they're going to be able to generate much of a rushing attack, especially without an it factor running back, a running back who's going to blaze you with the speed, who's going to make you miss things like that. So I'm not a huge fan of this Baylor offense. I'm a huge fan of the Utah defense. So for that reason, I'm sticking with the Baylor team total under 19.5, just for one unit, same as last week. Unfortunately, we haven't really gotten a side yet, But I think we're going to wait a couple more weeks and just kind of view the teams that Utah is going to be playing until we're really dabbling or putting any big wagers down. But for right now, just going to play it safe. Baylor team total under 19.5. Very similar as last week with the first half under. Nothing too crazy yet, just one unit. But that was all I got. Like I said, Baylor team total under 19.5 is your play. Best of luck for anyone else gambling this week. Like always, gamble responsibly. But as always, go Utes, and hopefully we can get another winner. Thanks.